As seen from the first season, genius structural engineer Michael Scofield designs an elaborate plan to break his framed brother, Lincoln Burrows, out of Fox River State Penitentiary. Throughout the end, the brothers are able to escape along with 6 other inmates, but the chase is far from over as more formidable officials get involved in the hunt. Season 2 directly follows this nail-biting experience of the escaped inmates, together with further developments in the corporate conspiracies of the story. This season shows a superb combination of humor, tragedy, drama, thrill, and intellectuality that is at the same level and standard of the first season. In the morning after the inmate's successful breakout, a high-ranking FBI agent named Alexander Mahone is preparing for a press conference. One by one, Mahone reviews the files of the 8 escaped inmates, who are now referred to by the media as the Fox River 8. Michael Scofield, a structural engineer, was charged 5 years for armed robbery. Benjamin Miles Franklin, also known as C-Note, was a former surgeon in the U.S. Army incarcerated for 8 years for possession of stolen goods. John Abruzzi, Don of the Abruzzi family, was sentenced for life without parole for conspiracy to commit murder. Charles Padoshik, commonly known as Haywire, was imprisoned for 60 years for committing second-degree murder. Fernando Sucre, Michael's cellmate from a Puerto Rican descent, was charged for 5 years for aggravated robbery. David Tweener Apolskis, deemed as a master pickpocket, was imprisoned for grand larceny. Theodore Bagwell, also called T-Bag, was imprisoned for life for 6 counts of kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. And Lincoln Burrows, Michael's brother, who was scheduled for a death sentence for the alleged murder of Terrence Stedman. During the press conference, Mahone flashes the images of the Fox River 8, addressing them as fugitives who are now the most wanted criminals in the entire United States. Mahone identifies Michael as the mastermind of the group, thus he decides to focus on Michael's background. In Fox River, he talks to Warden Pope for additional information. Warden Pope, on the other hand, thinks that it is still too early for Mahone and the FBI to be involved in the matters of the escaped inmates. When Mahone asks him regarding Dr. Sarah Tancredi, Warden Pope remains reserved and refuses to tell him any details. Mahone later heads to Michael's old apartment and finds traces of how Michael prepared his escape plan. In an instant, he figures out Michael's attachment to his brother, which is his motive for planning the entire escape. Knowing that Michael destroyed all the evidence, Mahone orders divers to search the river near his apartment. He also begins to study the tattoos in Michael's body and observes that the symbols and patterns are all related to their escape plans. Meanwhile, the remaining 5 inmates, Michael, Lincoln, Sucre, C-Note, and Abruzzi, are still on the run while Captain Bellick and his team of police officers aggressively chase them in the thick forest. The inmates discover a cargo train nearby, urging them to run through the other side to get away from Bellick and the officers. After much struggle, Michael and the rest of the inmates manage to lose Bellick. While taking a short break, C-Note expresses his annoyance at Abruzzi's jet plane, which took off when they reached the Goose Park airstrip. C-Note also reprimands Michael for keeping the money deal between him and Westmoreland a secret to everyone else in the group. Lincoln encourages Michael to part ways with Sucre, C-Note, and Abruzzi. Michael, however, refuses because they know about the hidden money already, and their location will be revealed once the officers capture any of them. Instead, he shares that they can all head to Utah and take the money with them all the way to Mexico. Besides, Abruzzi's jet plane is only their plan A. Their plan B includes going to a storage room to retrieve some items which Michael claimed he had prepared. He looks at one particular tattoo on his wrist, which reads "Right Chance Woods." Just then, a hunter and his young daughter catch sight of them. In a moment of desperation, Abruzzi takes the young daughter hostage, forcing the hunter to drop his weapon and surrender the keys to his vehicle before returning his daughter. The fugitives use the stolen vehicle to head to the said storage room. On their way, Michael leads the car to Oswego, where the storage room is located. In the meantime, T-Bag, looking pale, was separated from the others after Abruzzi cut his hand off. Despite the injury, he barely escapes from the radar of the chasing officers. He raids a nearby campsite and steals clothes and a cooler from campers. Later, T-Bag reaches a veterinary clinic where he threatens a veterinarian to reattach his hand without anesthesia. Elsewhere, Bellick and his team receive a call from the hunter and his daughter. The hunter tells Bellick about his previous encounter with the inmates, in which he learns that Michael and the others are heading to Oswego. Bellick scans through Michael's credit card records and finds a record of Michael's previous transaction in a storage facility. His team then immediately drives to the storage facility in Oswego. At the same time, Mahone arrives in the same location to monitor the case. Not wanting the FBI to get involved in their chase, Bellick pushes Mahone away as soon as he arrives. To their dismay, Bellick and the correctional officers fail to find the inmates inside the storage facility. While Bellick annoyingly leaves the location, Mahone learns the truth behind Michael's tattoo, Wright Chance Woods, which is actually a name that stands for Rip E. Chance Woods in a cemetery, where the 5 fugitives now are digging out a black trash bag under the tomb of E. Chance Woods, their storage room. The trash bag is filled with clothes, allowing all of them to put on a fresh set of clothes. Michael also retrieves a backpack which contains money, passports, and prepaid phone cards for him and Lincoln. There are also keys to a car that is parked a couple of yards from the cemetery. Just then, Mahone reaches the cemetery and starts looking around. He stops in front of their tomb, bringing confusion to the rest of them. While the others run, Michael pauses and watches Mahone. Before he runs away, he catches Mahone consuming a small pill from his ballpen. Shortly after, Mahone notices him running and begins to tail after them. However, Michael and the other inmates have successfully blended with the crowd in Oswego, causing Mahone to lose their trail. In the Montana mansion, Veronica finally gets to confront Terrence Stedman himself, the man who she has been investigating for months. On another note, Stedman tells Veronica that he is also a prisoner, as he is confined inside the mansion. He reveals that all the doors to the mansion open only from the outside, and every wall is bulletproof. But even so, Stedman insists that he is safe in the mansion. In turn, Veronica tries making a call through her phone and successfully reaches the police station in Blackfoot. Later, she receives a call from Lincoln, letting her know that they are out of Fox River. Veronica encourages him to surrender because she has found Terrence Stedman alive. While she happily tells Lincoln that he will be exonerated, men presumably from the company arrive in front of the mansion. One of the agents enters the mansion and instead of taking Stedman, shoots Veronica thrice, killing her. Hearing the gunshots from the phone, Lincoln falls on the floor and breaks down in shock. At that moment, Lincoln goes through grief while Michael stays by his side to comfort him. Around the same time, Sarah has just recovered from her drug overdose and is still under observation in the hospital. Another FBI agent visits Sarah to interrogate her about the Fox River 8 case. As it turns out, Sarah is being accused as an accessory to the escape and for having a close relationship with Michael, but Sarah denies the claims and refuses to tell any more information. Shortly after, her nurse friend, Katie, visits her in the hospital. Katie apologizes to Sarah for telling Warden Pope about her back in the infirmary. She later teases Sarah, saying that she was not the first person to fall for a convict. Sarah replies dispiritedly, claiming that Michael never cared for her. After Katie leaves, Sarah finds an origami swan slipped into her bag. As she unravels it, she sees a cryptic message from Michael along with dotted codes under. Back in the FBI headquarters, Mahone continues with his investigation on the whereabouts of Michael and their group. He is now aware that all of Michael's plans are in his tattoos, including how to get out of prison and how to disappear afterward. Later in a backyard, Mahone contacts the Mexican Border Patrol to set up checkpoints, while sending all of the Fox River 8's mugshots to the Border Patrol officers in Canada and Mexico. Meanwhile, Michael is out disguised in a hat and eyeglasses while secretly watching a family picnic. Frustrated, C-Note and Sucre protest, looking for Michael. Before another argument ensues, Michael comes back to an abandoned building carrying a newspaper and a picnic basket filled with fried chicken and drinks. While the group eats, Sucre expresses how anxious he is for being all over media outlets. Lincoln, on the other side, reads the newspaper which shows his son, LJ, about to be incarcerated. Shortly after, Michael gives Sucre, C-Note, and Abruzzi money, implying that he and Lincoln will be parting ways from them. For a while, they all wonder where Haywire, Tweener, and Teabag have all gone. Outside the abandoned building, Lincoln tells Michael about the updates on the newspaper. He is reluctant to leave with Michael to Utah because he has learned that LJ has a scheduled hearing that day in the Cook County Courthouse. Lincoln believes that he can reach LJ and take him with them as well. Michael, on the other hand, thinks that it is not the right time because there is no plan in place yet. Regardless, Lincoln insists on getting LJ in the courthouse. After much deliberation, Lincoln manages to convince Michael to save LJ. Before planning their attack at the courthouse, the brothers bid farewell to C-Note, Sucre, and Abruzzi as they each part ways at the abandoned building. That same morning in Fox River, Captain Bellick takes out his frustration at another correctional officer as he grumbles at how female employees should not be working in the military, police, and male correctional facilities. Warden Pope appears behind Bellick as he informs him that the FBI will be taking over the Fox River 8 case. Brad is insistent on catching them, but Pope dismisses him, stating that they have been summoned to the Department of Corrections, DOC. Inside the conference room, Warden Pope and Captain Bellick are both questioned by the DOC board members about the escape of Fox River 8. They reprimand Warden Pope for letting Michael take advantage of him inside his office. To Pope and Bellick's surprise, former officer Roy Gary enters the conference room. As it turns out, Gary steps in as a witness, confirming that Bellick has sold the right to run prison industries to Abruzzi, which in turn played a huge part in the Fox River 8's escape. After a while, the DOC board members have decided that Warden Pope will be placed on 3 months probation while Captain Bellick is officially terminated. Pope retorts, defending Bellick and all employees at Fox River, as he states that Michael is the sole person responsible for the escape. Before leaving the conference room, Pope announces that he will be quitting as well. Pope refuses to turn his back on Bellick, who despite his actions was dedicated to his job as a correctional officer. Later that day in the Cook County Courthouse, LG is brought inside an interrogation room through the instructions of Agent Mahone. Inside, Mahone tells LG how impressed he is at Michael and Lincoln for what they did to escape Fox River. He asks LG for help in bringing his father and uncle peacefully by talking to them through TV. Knowing that Mahone works for the people who framed them, LG refuses to help him. Before leaving, Mahone advises LJ to start thinking of himself because he has too much to endure in prison. Meanwhile, Michael and Lincoln enter a garage where Michael had prepared a car. Inside the car, Lincoln calls LG while posing as Nick Saverin, a member of LG's defense counsel. LG recognizes his father's voice and decides to play along to avoid suspicion. During their call, Lincoln leaves LG with a specific instruction, telling him that, on the 3rd, look out for Otis Wright before the two hang up. Michael makes a last stop in the hardware store before heading to the courthouse. Inside, he takes a duct tape, rope, and other items, ignoring the clerk who is trying to talk to him. While Lincoln waits for Michael, a woman suddenly recognizes Lincoln and has called the police. Seeing the police, Lincoln rushes inside to warn Michael, advising that they get out of the hardware store. Michael and Lincoln discreetly pass through the back door, but are dismayed upon seeing their vehicle surrounded by the police. The brothers then decide to walk on their way to the courthouse. All of a sudden, Lincoln is worried for Michael and insists on coming alone, but Michael is already set on saving LJ. In St. Louis, Missouri, Tweener has managed to blend in with the civilians after changing his clothes and shaving his head. While walking nervously through a bus station, he pretends to bump against a male commuter before stealing his wallet. Shortly after, he stands in line to buy a ticket to Utah when he notices a man on a bench reading a newspaper with the Fox River 8 in the headlines. Feeling anxious and impatient, Tweener runs away from the counter, failing to get the ticket. Later, Tweener steals a sweatshirt and a hat, posing as a college student in St. Louis Tech. While he strolls through the campus, he discovers an ad from someone named Deborah Bell, who is looking for someone who can share ride expenses to Utah. Seizing the opportunity, Tweener takes the ad and keeps it. Tweener meets Deborah on the campus that afternoon. He uses his alias, Scott Colbrenner, and claims to be heading to Utah to collect his grandfather's inheritance. Deborah seems reluctant to share a ride with him, but Tweener charms her. She then leads Tweener to her car, and they drive to Utah. Back in the clinic, the veterinarian Dr. Goudat finishes stitching T-Bag's hand. Since the procedure was done without any anesthetics, T-Bag ends up feeling nauseous. Dr. Goudat gives him some painkillers to ease the pain and wants to leave the clinic quietly, but T-Bag refuses to let him. When Dr. Goudat tries to run away, T-Bag catches up to him and strangles him. T-Bag ties Dr. Goudat on the medical table and tries to calm him down before injecting a syringe in his arm. Dr. Goudat lies on the table lifeless while T-Bag bleaches his hair. He comes out of the veterinary clinic with blonde hair and a new set of clothes before heading to Dr. Goudat's car. He accesses the navigation app of the car, stating that he will be heading to Utah. Later, Bellick returns to his home, feeling dejected after his termination. His mother knocks on his bedroom, who wonders why he is home early. Bellick makes up an excuse and gives her a kiss before she leaves. He grabs his shotgun, holding onto it while in deep thought. Right then, his mother comes to his door again, informing Bellick that there will be a generous reward for those who will catch the Fox River 8. Inside Warden Pope's office, Pope is preparing to pack his things when he glances at the Taj Mahal model. He slowly approaches the model, remembering the times that he and Michael were still building it. Pope still feels hurt that Michael had betrayed his trust when he treated him like a son. He gives one last look at the Taj Mahal model before deliberately destroying it into pieces. Handcuffed in the interrogation room, LG is again questioned by Agent Mahone about his call from Nick Saverin. Mahone reveals to LG that Nick is dead before showing him a recording of his previous phone call with Lincoln. He asks LJ who Otis Wright is, but LG claims to have no idea. In annoyance, Mahone threatens LJ to start talking or he will be severely punished by Mahone himself. Around the same time, Michael and Lincoln are up on the roof of the courthouse. While Lincoln creates an opening on the rooftop, Michael pulls yellow toy guns out and spray paints it to black. After the interrogation, Mahone requests to talk with the prosecutor for LG's case as a guard takes him to the elevator. Just then, LG notices the number 3 on the elevator. Recalling his father's instructions, he looks up until he sees the sign Otis Manufacturing above the elevator. LG finally understands that he must get into elevator 3, so he attempts to stall them by pretending to tie his shoes. As elevator 3 opens, the guard takes LG inside. Right then, Mahone also spots the Otis Manufacturing sign at the elevator. Before the elevator doors close, Mahone intervenes and replaces the guard inside the elevator. Just then, the elevator ceiling opens, revealing Lincoln and Michael. Lincoln aims the toy gun at Mahone, forcing him to surrender his weapon. LG stops the elevator and gives Mahone's gun to Michael. All of a sudden, Lincoln's toy gun drops on the floor, revealing that it is a fake gun. Realizing this, Mahone stops Lincoln from pulling LG up the ceiling. He also kicks off the emergency alarm, alerting everyone in the courthouse. Lincoln and Michael are forced to let LG go, and they retreat to the rooftop. As soon as the elevator door opens, Mahone alerts all the guards that Michael and Lincoln are in the building. The police officers also take LG straight to a detention center in Arizona. Michael and Lincoln then rush out of the courthouse as they hijack a small truck. Police officers chase after the small truck, but do not find Michael nor Lincoln. Somewhere nearby, Michael and Lincoln are running on foot when Lincoln suddenly falters. When Michael turns to Lincoln, he finds that his leg has been shot during the chase. As Michael ties a handkerchief around Lincoln's leg, Lincoln can only think about LG, feeling disappointed that he failed to get him. In the FBI field office in Chicago, Agent Lang reports updates on Agent Mahone, stating that the hospitals have been alerted in case Michael and Lincoln drop by for treatment. Agent Lang also reports that the families of all the inmates are currently under surveillance. Later, another FBI agent brings in a backpack the police got from a homeless man. As it turns out, the homeless man had stolen the backpack from Michael and Lincoln's car, which contained fake passports, phones, and everything else they needed to disappear from their radar. Meanwhile, Bellick heads to a convenience store to buy some beer and jerky when he sees Geary working as a security guard in the store. Enraged, Bellick rushes to Geary as soon as they meet, hitting punches at each other. After their fight, the two quickly reconcile and drink together. Bellick tells Geary that since he was fired, he will continue as a bounty hunter and catch the fugitives. Hearing this, Geary proposes to be Bellick's partner as they chase after the inmates. Thus, Bellick and Geary begin their pursuit by interrogating May Sanchez, Sucre's cousin who failed to make it through the wall. The two sneak back into Fox River, pressuring Manch to reveal more information about their escape plan. Through Manch, Bellick and Geary learn about Westmoreland's hidden money in Utah, prompting them to go after the money on top of the reward. In the meantime, Michael and Lincoln rush to NECA's apartment, where they get Lincoln treated. NECA is deeply worried about the brothers' sudden appearance in the apartment because the police had just visited her. Regardless, she helps the brothers as she provides first aid and clean clothes for Lincoln. While Lincoln takes time to recover, Michael goes back to the hardware store to retrieve their car and his backpack. To Michael's dismay, their car has been towed and is no longer parked in front of the store. Michael then heads to the towing company to retrieve the car. However, when he finds the car, one of its windows is broken and the backpack is not inside. Michael consults Chuck, the employee in the towing company, about the backpack, but Chuck says that there was no backpack when they towed the car. As Michael signs the paperwork, Agent Mahone calls Chuck, looking for a man identical to Michael's description. Chuck affirms that Michael is in the towing company right at that moment, causing Mahone to send units at the place immediately. But when Chuck turns around, Michael has already grabbed the keys and left with his car. Back in NECA's apartment, Michael apologizes to NECA for all the trouble they caused before they drive away. At the same time, C-Note is on a payphone talking to his wife. He tells her that he will be waiting in the Rainbow Room, where they took a beautiful picture. His wife, however, feels reluctant and is not sure whether she can still trust him. All the while, the FBI has tapped into the phone call and is listening to their conversation. Agent Lang thinks that the Rainbow Room restaurant is what they were talking about. Regardless, Mahone instructs Lang to visit C-Note's wife and get her to talk about him. Sometime later, C-Note stops by his daughter's school and asks her to relay a message to her mother, instructing her to open their porch light if she still wants to meet him. After a while, C-Note comes to their house and hides by the fence, waiting for his wife's response. His wife contemplates, staring at their daughter who is currently sleeping in her room. It is then revealed that the Rainbow Room C-Note mentioned is actually their daughter's bedroom, where a rainbow and their family picture are placed on the wall near the window. After much thinking, his wife opens their porch light, bringing relief to C-Note as soon as he sees it. On another note, Agent Lang is seen inside their house while his wife sits down for an interview. Elsewhere, Sucre contacts his friend, Petey, through the payphone. Sucre seeks to talk to Maricruz, but Petey tells him that she and Hector are getting married the next day. Despite being hurt, Sucre does not give up on Maricruz and instead wants to talk her out of marrying Hector. He hangs up on Petey before hotwiring a car and uses it to drive to Petey's apartment in New York. On his way, Sucre is almost caught by a police officer, but he manages to escape undetected. When he reaches Petey's apartment, however, Sucre finds out that Maricruz and Hector are getting married in Las Vegas and that they already left. In a rush, Sucre borrows Petey's motorbike and drives all the way to Vegas to stop their wedding. Around the same time, Sarah has just signed her release papers in the hospital when the police arrive and arrest her. From a distance, Kellerman is talking on the phone with President Reynolds, who gives him orders to watch over Sarah. Her father, Governor Frank Tancredi, arrives at the police station and meets Sarah in an interrogation room. He tells her to point the blame on Warden Pope to keep her from being involved in the escape. Sarah is hesitant to do so, admitting to her father that she helped the inmates escape. But Frank dismisses Sarah and instead orders her to go to support groups that can help her handle her addiction. Before they part ways, Frank shares that he will be sworn in as the next vice president of the country, but advises her not to attend his inauguration. Meanwhile, Michael and Lincoln talk about Mahone while driving. Michael thinks that the chase has gotten interesting because of Agent Mahone. He says that Mahone is unlike the other officials whom they have previously encountered, since he knows what they are thinking. Therefore, Michael and Lincoln plan to stage an accident in order to stop Mahone and the FBI from continuously chasing after them. Michael later explains that his tattoos are not only for breaking out, but also for their survival outside the prison. Another tattoo on Michael's wrist is then revealed, showing a barcode with the numbers 3812-1037. At that moment, Michael takes a turn to Illinois Route 38. He fakes a call, knowing that his phone is wiretapped by Mahone and his team. Michael drives for 12 more miles before abruptly stopping the car in the middle of a bridge. They proceed to drive the car down the bridge, planting fake corpses inside to make the FBI think that they're dead. Ultimately, the brothers turn the radio on and press the scan button. When the frequency is reached 103.7, a bomb is triggered inside the car, creating a massive explosion down the bridge. Just before Mahone and the FBI arrive, Michael and Lincoln run far away from the scene. Mahone and the FBI arrive at the site shortly after the explosion. They find the car destroyed along with the corpses inside. While the other agents seem convinced that the brothers died in a car accident, Mahone only stares at the car and takes another pill hidden inside his pen. Later, Michael and Lincoln meet with Nneka as she gives them her car. Michael promises that he will pay her when they arrive in Mexico. Unbeknownst to them, Bellick and Jerry are watching them from afar. While driving, Lincoln notices that a car has been following them. Michael, Lincoln, and Nneka turn around only to find Bellick and Jerry inside the other car. Gary accelerates and aggressively bumps their car until they hit a tree. Bellick corners them, pointing his gun in their direction. He later informs Michael and Lincoln that Mancha told him about the $5 million that Westmoreland has hidden in Utah. Thus, Bellick coerces Michael into guiding them on their way to the money. While Bellick forces the three inside Gary's car, Lincoln manages to damage one of the tires by placing a glass shard right under the tire. Back in the FBI field office, Agent Mahone's assistant shows him some of the files that they recovered from Michael's hard drive, which he had thrown in the river. Mahone looks through articles that include information on Abruzzi, Sarah, and D.B. Cooper's hijacked money. Agent Lang also arrives and informs Mahone that the corpse inside the car matched Michael and Lincoln's blood types. Wanting to make sure, Mahone instructs them not to declare the deaths yet and do more tests. As Tweener travels with Deborah Jean on their way to Utah, the car radio suddenly talks about the news on Fox River 8's breakout. Tweener panics and switches the radio on another station. Slowly, Deborah Jean grows more suspicious of Tweener and decides to stop over at a motel in Colorado. Despite being nervous around him, Deborah Jean and Tweener drink and spend the night together. Later, Gary's car is forced to stop in the middle of the road after one of his tires goes flat. While Gary walks to another town to get a new tire, Bellick leads Michael, Lincoln, and Nneka and ties them inside a small abandoned establishment. Nneka, feeling threatened for her life, seemingly approaches Bellick in another room to negotiate a deal with him. She claims to reveal the exact location of the money in Utah if she gets her share with it. Before agreeing to the deal, Bellick also insists that she sleeps with him, to which Nneka eventually agrees. As Nneka seduces him, Bellick catches her stealing his gun and figures out that Nneka has only been fooling him. He brings Nneka back to Michael and Lincoln and ties her up again. Yet, shortly after, Bellick notices that his knife is missing. Before he could react, Lincoln, who has already freed himself, points the knife on Bellick's throat. At this moment, Yuri arrives in the establishment with a new tire, dismayed that Bellick could not handle them well. Yuri is forced to surrender the new tire to them, as Michael and Lincoln tie them both. In response, Bellick guilt trips Michael and tells him how Sarah has suffered from an overdose because of her feelings for him. Enraged, Michael kicks Bellick to shut him up. Back in Chicago, Kellerman continues to keep watch on Sarah, who has been constantly attending meetings with other drug addicts. He joins the support group and poses as another addict named Lance to get close to Sarah. During one of their meetings, Kellerman tries approaching Sarah and befriends her. In the middle of their conversation, Sarah gets a call from Michael. Sarah does not want to talk to Michael, but Michael continues to apologize for hurting her. He also assures her that what they have for each other is real. Before hanging up, Michael says that there is a way he can protect her, and it is already in her possession. Sarah calls out Michael's name, causing Kellerman to look up at her. Back in the abandoned establishment, Michael, Lincoln, and Nneka are preparing to leave. Nneka insists on coming with them to Mexico, but Michael declines her request, saying that it is not the life that she wants. In turn, Nneka steals the gun from Lincoln and aims it at them. Consumed by jealousy, Nneka confesses to Michael that she loves him, but that she is hurt because he has only been using her. Knowing that Michael won't ever return her feelings, she plans to turn them into the police and get the reward money instead. Before she could make a call, Lincoln stops her, implying that she won't be able to shoot them because he pulled out the bullets earlier. While Nneka is stunned, Lincoln takes the gun and the phone away from her and gets inside the car. Feeling sorry, Michael wishes her luck and bids farewell to Nneka before they drive off. That same day in Friend, Nebraska, T-Bag stops by a gasoline station to check on his injured hand. When he comes back to his stolen vehicle, he finds it surrounded by the police. In turn, he poses as Clyde May, a former U.S. Marine who got wounded while serving in Afghanistan, avoiding suspicion from the officers. T-Bag walks his way to Utah, forced to leave the vehicle when a car stops in front of him. A man steps out of his car and, out of goodwill, invites T-Bag to share a ride with him and his teenage daughter. In the rest stop, T-Bag makes a move on the man's daughter, causing a fight between him and the man. However, T-Bag defeats him, stealing his car and hat before leaving the father and the daughter in the rest stop. In Brooklyn, New York, Abruzzi meets with one of his henchmen, who later takes him to see his family. Shortly after their reunion, Abruzzi receives news that Fibonacci is about to testify again in Washington, D.C. His wife, Sylvia Abruzzi, advises him not to chase after Fibonacci any longer and stay with them in hiding back to Sardinia in Italy. Despite that, Abruzzi chooses to get back at Fibonacci and goes to the alleged location in a motel. To his surprise, the lead turns out to be false and was actually a setup arranged by Agent Mahone and the FBI. The FBI agents have Abruzzi cornered inside the building, ready to arrest him. Abruzzi, however, refuses to return to Fox River and decides on fighting them. He comes out of the building, facing Mahone and the FBI agents, who eventually shoots him to death. Later in the FBI field office, Mahone crosses out Abruzzi's mugshot, indicating that they have taken down one of the 8 escaped inmates. Just then, he receives a report from his assistant, stating that the car accident from the bridge was staged. The FBI eventually discovers that the blood from the explosion came from a pig. Upon hearing this, Mahone is reminded of Oscar Shales, an inmate from a previous case, who Mahone has yet to capture. He stares at Michael's mugshot for a while, before throwing it down the floor in frustration.